Welcome to another episode of Six Figure Secrets for Fractional Experts. My name is Bradley Jacobs. I'm your host and the founder and CEO of Mylance. Today, I'm joined by Mark Jackson. Mark is the co-founder and CEO of Besolo. Before that, he was a fractional CRO and then started Besolo about 2 years ago. I'm super excited to have you, Mark, on the show. Welcome.
It's good to be here, Bradley. Thanks.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your story, because anytime someone starts their own business, right, there's always a story of how you got there and why this problem, why this customer. Obviously, it's the same customer that we have. So tell us a little bit about the journey to starting Besolo.
My dad was a business of one excavation company my whole life. And I watched him, upstairs during tax season, swearing at 1040 Schedule Cs. And and he did all of his own, like he would literally just pile up receipts and like do all of his own quarterly estimated taxes and all of his own Schedule Cs. And it was always like a touchy time for my dad and being around my dad during tax season. And then when I went to college, after college, I went to the film industry and was independent for about like 6 years. And, just really had this like strong feeling of like, wow, we kind of get screwed when you make the choice to be solo, to be an independent, to be a fractional, a freelancer, whatever it is. I was, even before this major event happened in my life, I was already starting to understand like, wow, there's a lot of compromise to living this lifestyle. The governments kind of seem to leave us behind. And then while I was fractional, most recently, my wife became a kidney transplant patient. So she got a kidney transplant about 10 years ago now, and she's doing fantastic. So we're super grateful and happy there. But, once you need healthcare, you really understand the importance of healthcare. My wife's kidney transplant ended up costing north of $1 million, all said and done. And in the state that I'm in today, I'm in Arizona. I would actually rather be like a fractional. I love the lifestyle. I love working for who I want to work for, how I want to work, when I want to work is really important too. But the access to healthcare here in Arizona, with her specialty medications, I think we'd be out. I did the math one day, and it was something like 70 to 80 grand per year, all in, including the premiums and then the additional cost for the medication. And I was just like super pissed about that. Honestly, I felt abandoned by my government. And I was like, I wonder if there's some way that we could pool people together to take the solo and make them powerful in numbers. And I was lucky enough to have a little bit of exposure to this concept of PEO, or professional employer organization. Everybody, and like most people that's ever been employed at a company north of 50 employees, has probably been under a PEO. It's basically where companies, multiple different companies, pool all their employees together under the payroll of another company. And the big names in these companies today are like ADP, JustWorks, Rippling. Those are all big PEOs. And I was like, I wonder if we can take that same concept and work it to the solo space, right? To find a way to create strength in numbers, because there are so many solos today. And so that was like the first exploration of Besolo is, hey, is it legally viable to create a group healthcare option for solos? And a lot of legal expense later, and a lot of kind of leveraging some of my past life of being, number 4 at one of those big PEOs, Velocity Global, got us to the point where we're like, yeah, we can do this. But we realized we had to be able to support all the other pieces in order to make that happen, because the only way we could do it then was through S-Corp, which is like a big topic in the solo space now. Is like, okay, we can put them under our payroll if they're running payroll for themselves, and then unlock our group benefits. But you have to be S-Corp to do that. So we were like, well, we can't just be like, oh, you can just do S-Corp, right? Because you can't just do S-Corp. It's like a big undertaking. So we're like, okay, we have to support all the financial side of S-Corp, and then we have to support all the compliance side of S-Corp. And we realized pretty soon, we're like, wow, we've got the complete operational and financial and benefits stack for a business of one. And that's where we are today. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a journey, but it's, but it started off from frustration. And a lot of people ask me like, hey, why this business? And I was like, well, I found the problem that I hated the most and also saw a solution that could actually be executable within the limitations that we exist in today. So we were like, so then myself and my co-founder jumped on it.
And I feel like a lot of people hear S-Corp and maybe their eyes glaze over. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so, really, the simplest in layman's terms, right, is it is a tax classification of an entity where you essentially make yourself an employee of the entity.
Yep.
And then you need to pay yourself a salary, which is where payroll comes in. And that's how you can group the benefits together. And the biggest benefit from a tax perspective, right, is you save on the self-employment tax of the piece that's not a salary.
Exactly.
Right? So the 15.3% of self-employment tax, right, you can then avoid. Whereas if you don't do the S-Corp, you're paying 15.3% on the whole.
Whole kit and caboodle. All net income goes through that. Right. Up to, there's a cap on that. It's around, I think in 25, it's like 177 or 178. But that's typically where, most solos live in that kind of successful solos live in that 100 to 200 range. So most of them are getting pretty penalized by that self-employment tax. So yeah.
I mean, I know my first year when I switched from an LLC to an LLC tax as an S-Corp, I think I saved about $20,000. Like it was a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal, but it's also a big decision, right? And it's a decision that, we as a company offer both LLC support and S-Corp support because for a lot of solos, what we're finding is the value of the freedom and flexibility is so high too that getting into a structure of turning yourself into a corporation and running a payroll for yourself might actually be what ends up leading to them, what we say, churning back to W-2, right? That's our whole mission now. Our whole mission is to make the solopreneurial lifestyle, the independent lifestyle, as sustainable and free of compromise as compared to a W lifestyle. We want to level that playing field. It won't be exactly even in all the bar charts, but it will pan out to being even as long as you can find your own work. Right. Yeah.
Right. Because we all know the benefits of fractional work. I don't think anyone at this point is not sure of that. Yeah. But I mean, I'd love to just hear you talk more about this. Like at the end of the day, you're running a full-fledged business of everything a business requires, bookkeeping, taxes, health insurance, invoicing, all of it by yourself.
Yes.
100%. Right? I mean, how do you do that? I mean, that's like the biggest thing, right? And business development. I didn't even mention it. Like, oh yeah, by the way, marketing and sales and that whole thing. Yeah,
that little guy. Yeah, just the entire, that normally is an entire organization of a company, right? Yeah, you're doing it all. And I feel like beyond just kind of the challenges that we face as solopreneurs and freelancers and fractionals from a, hey, there's real compromises where you might hit a brick wall and that you like literally cannot move forward with this lifestyle. We're also fairly left behind when it comes to the playbooks, right? There are real playbooks, right? And they are applicable across almost all types of solopreneurs, right? Like a contract person that does excavation or a trade work is actually, from a business perspective, not that different than, a fractional CMO. They're actually extremely similar. And that was another big realization for us is to, oh my God, these people are actually far more similar than they think in terms of admin compliance, taxes, and benefits access. And so like part of like what we're trying to do is playbook that out. And I think one of the really unique things that we're trying to do right now is to actually get people to kind of let go of the monthly book close idea. Right? Like we're not reporting to anybody. It's not like you have to show your P&L to a board of investors or anything like that. It's you, and you probably know whether or not you're making enough money. We're actually finding that one of like our kind of very unique playbooks is to actually recommend doing like a macro reconciliation on a quarterly level, because that's when quarterly estimated taxes are done. Right? So rather than like worry yourself around making sure that everything's super balanced each month and like kind of freak out about that, is like, instead of doing like 2 hours, 3 hours a month, why don't we just stack it all into like one big moment with a USA based CPA to kind of go through and like, cool, we're good, quarter's done, right? And I think that's one of the big things is it's hard to find the education and the playbooks that are right sized for you as a solopreneur, right? You go and like, I find a lot of people will accidentally end up in a C-Corp structure because that's right for a tech startup that's trying to raise funding. And they're like, hey, I'm a C-Corp. I'm like, oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. Are you making more than like, because that only makes sense if you're making more than like 750 or 800 a year. And it's like, no, they're just a normal fractional who rabbit holed on some information and ended up in a C-Corp structure. So I think that's the other big piece here is access to playbooks is going to drastically help the solopreneur. It's happening, like this, there's a wave of solopreneurialism happening since COVID, 3 million new solopreneurs, full-time solopreneurs per year right now. And it's like,
wow.
Yeah. So we just want to be a part of that story of helping people, Bradley, what was the thing for you though, that really, what was your worst story in solopreneurialism? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, one of them was, it's a little bit less tangible, but it was lack of structure of my life. Like I would wake up, and at one point, at the beginning, I only had one client. It was 25 hours a week, but it was paying me more than my previous W-2 salary. And so I really didn't need to work that hard. And I woke up almost with like an existential crisis of like, what do I do right now? All of my friends are working. It's Tuesday at 11 a.m. I don't really have anything I need to be doing right now. I only need to work 3 hours a day. It was like creating a structure for myself that someone else had previously given me, right? Be in the office around 9, go to meetings all day and do some work and leave at 7 and whatever, right? And now I had none of that. It was all gone. I had no manager. I had no boss. I had no peers. I had no anything, performance review, promotion, salary. It was just like bizarre. So, I mean, that was one. It was like, oh my God, I need a structure immediately, right? Of like, I'm going to work at these times and I'm literally going to set meetings with myself and set my own priorities and OKRs and like the whole thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And even check in with myself. Like I literally gave myself performance reviews. Like, how am I doing?
100%.
Because I had this existential question of, is this okay? Like, can I only work 25 hours a week? And is that allowed? Like, it was right. And then the other piece, honestly, was the bookkeeping and taxes. It was something I had no idea how to do. I didn't know what I even needed to be doing. I didn't know about quarterly estimated taxes. I was trying not to get, screwed by the IRS. I was like, how do I avoid a nasty letter in the mail or a big bill at the end of the year?
Yep.
I just didn't know what I didn't know. And it was kind of terrifying. So I literally went out and hired a CPA.
Yeah.
I really did. And this was
did you get lucky with it, or was it a bad experience?
It was not the best experience, but it started the journey of me learning what I needed to learn, and and eventually, as I started Mylance, and the first product we had was bookkeeping. Like similar to you, I was like, I'm going to solve my own problem here, and I'm not the only one with this problem. Yeah. So we offered a bookkeeping subscription for like 2 years.
Mine wasn't that different than yours, honestly. Like I think it was like the 3rd or 4th year in to being fractional, had an okay year and then had a really good year and had a CPA by that point. And I didn't realize that the CPA was calculating my quarterly estimated taxes by just taking the previous year's tax and dividing it by 4 and giving me the voucher. Once I didn't understand at that time that quarterly estimated taxes should be responsive to your net income, not just that's what you pay. So I was going through this year I'm like, oh my God, being independent is amazing. I'm crushing it. I've got like so much more money. I've got so much more time. I'm actually like having to figure out what to do with free time. Like, is it okay to go to the beach midweek to go for a run? I guess so, Right. But then got to April and had to pay I think it was $29,000 that I didn't pay because I did $100K more than I did the previous year. And that was one of those moments where I was like, that was one of those existential crises of like, do I want to keep doing this? Right. Yeah. This is nasty. Like I just got not bit by a snake, but smashed by a rock. And all of a sudden that good year went to really not fun, but kept moving forward, decided I liked the freedom, but that was definitely a moment where I almost churned back to W-2.
So let's talk about churn back to W-2, because I think anyone who's going on the fractional journey, nobody wants to quote churn back to W-2. right?
Right.
Like as a business, you don't want that and they don't want that. So what is the biggest difference that you've seen from the people that make this truly sustainable for the
Mhm.
long term versus those who, as you said, turn back to W-2?
Two things come to mind, right? Is one is I do think the idea of the portfolio career in general is becoming a lot more acceptable and also I think should be welcomed. I don't think you have to be so staunch on yourself these days of I'm either independent or I'm not. We have a large percentage of members that what I like to say pendulum. And I was one of those people too, right? Depending on how the wind blew, might hop back into a W 2 opportunity for a period of time because it makes so much damn sense. And I think that's really common in the fractional and kind of contractor space, right? Whether you're software engineer, designer, fractional C something O. And I think that should be totally okay. And I think one of the things that's really important to think about is to not, to make sure that you still have your side hustle supported. I actually love it when we get members who are what we call solo curious or very early solo. And they ask me the question around, hey, like, if I go back to W2, is B Solo still going to help me out? I said, yeah, because we still do your quarterly estimated taxes, which if you're doing self-employed income of any kind, those are still on the table. And then we also do everybody's year-end taxes, regardless of whether they are in a W-2 or not, or whether their spouse is in a W-2 or not. To me, this whole space is evolving to be a little bit more flexible. And I think it's a lot more common for somebody to have a side hustle, maybe step into some independent work for a period of time, and then go back to a W-2 job. So that's like the first thing that comes to mind is like, you don't have to be so black and white and hard on yourself about being black and white. If you're consulting and you see an amazing W-2 opportunity that you just cannot pass up because it's right for your family or whatever it is, that's totally okay. Our recommendation is, and our thought process is like, well, why don't you keep your consulting thing going in a little way so that if that W-2 job ever becomes something that's not working for you anymore, you can swing back in like the pendulum and be really responsive to the changing tides. And I think we've all seen that happen a lot with folks getting laid off without knowing, right? Like that seems to be every week in the news. You're like, oh, there goes another 10,000 from somewhere. And I just imagine, if those people had a good side hustle where they were consulting, those moments wouldn't be so painful. So that's like my first thought on it. My second thought is it feels like the folks who become very sustainably solo figure out how to productize their offer in some way, shape, or form. To say, oh my God, my list rate is $250 an hour. And I know once I do fractional work in a retainer structure that'll probably be, reduced down to 150 or 175 or something. And I felt really good because I was making, what an attorney makes. So it's awesome. But I feel like that is a potential trap over time. If you're just trying to do that one-to-one hours to money relationship, that can lead to a situation that is not sustainable. I know for me, like the big leap forward in my fractional work was when I productized basically this how to become an SEO, SEM company. And I called it the Foundation Sprint. And it was about building a bridge solution, right? I would come into these companies and take all of my knowledge and kind of get them to that new paradigm. And they would pay me amazingly for it. And it was a repeatable structure that I could hit each time that wasn't going to get completely sideswiped by some problem that I couldn't execute against because I had this playbook that I built for a problem that I knew was reoccurring for lots of different companies. So yeah, I think that's the people that are like, I think that I see that are like really crushing it in the sustainability, at least from an income perspective, figure out some way to take their one-to-one time to dollars relationship and turn it into a productized offering in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, I love that take. And I recently read Built to Sell.
Nice. Yeah.
Did you read it? Have you read it?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and for
100%.
anyone, we don't need to go into the whole detail because this isn't about productizing offers, but for anyone wanting more clarity on what that means and how to execute it, that book is fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's like
so
fundamental. Yeah. You like kind of need
you kind
to.
of need to, and it is the
Yeah.
simplest book in the world. Like I love how it's done and the story that they tell and how it is simple they make it. In
Yeah.
practice, executing a productized service is so
Yeah.
incredibly difficult because it forces you to say no to so much,
Yeah.
right? And it forces you to super niche down and be like, this
Yeah.
is what we offer, nothing else. And you even, right, you did the same thing. You named your method, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing, right? And so you
Yep.
just got to do it and you got to say no to everything else. And the discipline required to do that
Yeah.
is one of the most challenging things, I think. It's simple in
So,
practice, but wow.
for sure. And I think it's like it's evolving whatever you were doing on your kind of personal outreach side of things to also match that offer is, I think, was a big mental leap for me because I never wanted to potentially miss a foot in the door.
Right.
Even though a lot of times getting the foot in the door was where I ended up with like the worst client scenarios. The way we see it, right, is like there is massive churn back to W2 traps on both sides of the coin, the demand side and delivery side, as well as the, if you hit the same brick wall that I hit where your family actually needs benefits access, that's game over. Like you can't in this country right now, you cannot fight that one. It's proper game over. Well, until Besolo came around.
There you go.
Yeah.
So a lot of the fractionals, independent consultants of the world, myself included, first client kind of falls in your lap in some way, right? It just kind of happens. It's a friend of a friend.
Right.
It's a referral. It's like, hey, Mark, can you do some work for me? And you're like, sure. And then you build this good rate and you're like, oh my God, this is epic.
Right.
And then maybe another one falls and another one falls. And all of a sudden you have this business and maybe you're doing like 20 or 30K a month and, things are good. And then, there's a whole business development journey that you start going down. But let's just put that to the side for a second. And let's talk about the other side. If I'm a fractional and I am, let's say, making or planning to make, somewhere around 100K a year, what are the things, like simplify it for me, because I feel like it can be very overwhelming to think about. What are the things I need to get set up for my business from an infrastructure perspective that keeps me in a good spot regarding IRS, health insurance, whatever, all of the things? Like simplify it for me if I'm that person.
Totally. Yeah. So the operational back office stack for a solopreneur. And it's actually not just, and this is what I loved diving into this space as a former, is like realizing that it actually didn't matter whether you were fractional, graphic designer, a wedding photographer, a tradesperson, like my dad. Like it's actually the same stack, right? We find that the first decision that everybody needs to make is their company type. Are you a sole proprietor, right, where you're going to be contracting as yourself? Are you going to be an LLC where you actually register an entity with the state? Or are you going to be an S-Corp, which is the most common corporation structure, like you said, which is LLC electing S-Corp in the eyes of the IRS? So that tends to be one of those big questions. A lot of people lean towards sole proprietor because it's the simplest and you don't have to do anything, but don't realize that they're putting themselves potentially at risk for a lot of liability, right? If you're contracting, if you're handshaking, if you're accepting money from people as a sole proprietor, right, you are effectively saying my person will be on the hook for this work in perpetuity, especially if you're doing it without any contracts that define the limitations of liability too. And, what we like to say is like, there are certain types of businesses and offerings, right, that is probably okay, right? If you're retouching wedding photos as a digital photo retoucher, as long as you don't lose all of them, right? Because that would be like the one big scenario where like, oh dang. But the funny thing is, like, what if we think about like that's probably not that risky, but I actually look at somebody like a wedding photographer and realize, wow, they're holding cameras, probably standing above people in a physical space where someone might really get injured. They're recommending people stand next to certain things. Maybe somebody falls down. It's all of these and that's once again, kind of like the government is not set up well. The country's not set up well for kind of defining that risk for a business of one. Because if you're doing that business, you're the same type of liability that a company with a team of lawyers has, but you just don't have the bandwidth to actually be able to take that hit if something does happen. So I think choosing your company structure, and we have a whole bunch of webinars on how to decide on that. And S-Corp tends to be very revenue focused and pretty clear. The fuzzy metric is always around like, how much do I value my freedom and flexibility?
So, welcome back. We actually had a complete Riverside fail on our first recording. And so you can notice the wardrobe change. And we are a week later. So you won't know that, but just calling it out. So
does my facial hair look different? I can't tell what I had.
Yeah.
We're in the second act now of the podcast.
A whole different person now, a week later. I love it. So I've never had that happen. So this is a first. But so to pick up where we left off, we were talking about the office stack that a business of one needs. And we were talking about LLCs versus S-Corps. Let's just go there for a minute. How do you think about advising someone on LLC versus S-Corp? What are the considerations there? Or neither, right? There's also the sole prop or even a C-Corp option. There's other options, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So let's start at the simplest, right? So sole prop, C-Corp, don't even have to think about it unless you're making well north of like 550, 600. There's like maybe some math that starts working there. But for 99.99%, not even worth looking at. Sole proprietor, is just the basic idea or the basic definition of anybody who starts doing business as a business of one. As soon as you make your first deal, you are a sole proprietor. You didn't register with anybody. But the downside of a sole proprietorship, right, is like you are contracting as yourself, not as a business. There's no separation between yourself and the business activities and the business liabilities, right? I'm not a tax professional. I'm not a law professional, but I think what I love to do is just kind of give people a framework, a simplified framework on how to look at these decisions, right? And so sole proprietorship, something goes wrong in your business, and there's a lot of ways that things can go wrong. Really stupid ways too, right? Like you can injure somebody while driving to a job, and that may or may not be a business liability, right? You could have a data leak for a client that you were working on that wasn't actually your fault, but you're getting sued because the client is VC funded. All these really types of weird liabilities that open up. So in our eyes, we think about it in terms of the spectrum of risk, in terms of should I be a sole prop or an LLC S-Corp? If you're on the very, very, very low spectrum of risk, like I put like wedding photo retouchers in that bucket, right? Maybe they don't have that much risk, and the photos are duplicated in 4 different hard drives, and everybody's fine with it. But I mean, if you lost the photos, there's risk right there. That's on you. Yeah. So sole proprietors, super low risk, and then you can use business insurance to kind of hedge against any of that risk. Like for some people, that makes sense. For the vast majority of people that Besolo serves, we work with a lot of consultants, fractionals, software engineers, designers, people that at a very high level actually are impacting businesses in a meaningful way. And a lot of those businesses are venture-backed startups or startups that make a fair amount of money with stakeholders. So in our eyes, it's like, it doesn't cost that much to make an LLC. And it's really not that hard and we're not the only people that provide like a compliance calendar. Like once you understand what the compliance dates are and how to do that, there are options, but it's something that Besolo does too. Once you understand those compliance dates, it's not that expensive to be able to say like, I'm working as a business and my business made those choices. And I have this level of protection between the business liabilities and my house or my cats. I don't know why somebody would try to take my cats in a lawsuit, but that's where my brain always goes. They're going to take my fur babies. That's how we kind of frame the lens of, okay, should I do sole proprietor or LLC S-Corp? And it's around your tolerance for risk. And also this, like I said, this day is super easy to check the box. We always say, might as well check the box. They're not that hard to tear down to if you have to. Once it comes to LLC versus sole proprietor, We've found that Besolo is one of the only companies out there giving the full picture of how to consider S-Corp. A lot of companies and even CPAs will just be like, hey, you're making above this, do it. And they won't ask you questions around how consistent is your revenue, right? Because the S Corp is going to require you to run a payroll to see the big tax savings that come from S Corp. And for a lot of people, it's huge tax savings.
Yeah.
But money's not everything for some people, right? Like, and it's not for me. Like for me, the whole solopreneurial fractional lifestyle was about freedom and flexibility. I liked spending time with my wife while she was, going through a kidney transplant process and recovering from that. Like it was way more about being able to be there in my life and be present than it was about saving another $3,000. So everybody else says, S Corp, you get above this level, do it. We say that's consideration number one, revenue threshold. If you're above a revenue threshold, then you might actually open the door to tax savings opportunity. The next consideration is about the operational burden of running an S Corp, and that's revenue consistency. It's going to be far easier to run a salary for yourself, which can be, a lot of people will do that quarterly. Some people even do that annually. They'll do like one big salary at the end of the year. Our platform is set up to do salary just like at a W-2 job every other week. It's a lot easier to do that if your revenue is consistent. We say, hey, plus or minus 10% is ideal. And the revenue threshold that we say is like more like 80 to 100K, because we don't want people to just do S Corp and then have to pay for something like Besolo or one of the other providers and then like net out $500. I promise you it's not worth it for $500 because of all these other things we're talking about. The third consideration is your value on freedom and flexibility in this lifestyle, right? How important is it for you to just be able to, not think about your business that much? Because the payroll piece, we like to call it the payroll treadmill. You're going to get on that treadmill and it's going to keep going at a certain speed. And you got to keep walking with it. Otherwise, you're going to fall behind and you get really stressed out. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be fines or big compliance challenges, but it just means it's way easier if you're able to just walk on that treadmill. So for some people that want to go to Bali for 6 months out of the year, make $150,000 the first 6 months doing some focused project and then bail out and go work at a bar in Bali, like S Corp, probably not a great fit. So those are our three considerations.
Yeah. So just to simplify what I'm hearing, the LLC versus sole prop is more of a legal risk decision.
Yes.
The S Corp is a taxation, which is more of the finance and taxes decision of, are there tax savings for me there? And as you make that decision, the additional consideration is the consistency of revenue, running payroll, the additional compliance pieces that come with an S Corp. It's not something you just elect and it's like done. You need to stay on top of it.
It's not a box you check. There are operational burdens. The compliance goes up. Payroll compliance is payroll operations, payroll compliance is a real thing. Having cleaner books, no connection of business and personal finance at all. Yeah, like way more stringent.
What about the other things, right? There's health insurance. There's obviously like invoicing, more back office things. Like what are the other things, if we just talk about the entire toolkit that this solopreneur needs?
Yeah.
What are the other things?
Yeah. And real quick too, I think an even simpler way to look at LLC versus sole prop versus sole S Corp is, how am I viewed in the eyes of the state, which is basically answering the question is, how am I doing business? Am I doing business as an individual? And that risk is tied to me as an individual in the eyes of the state, because law and courts happen in states. And then if I'm electing LLC or S Corp, I'm now registering as a company in that state to do business as a company. And then the S Corp piece, whether you're S Corp or LLC, is in the eyes of the IRS. Right? So how am I viewed as a business in the eyes of the IRS? LLC and sole proprietor, exactly the same. And for all intents and purposes, in the eyes of the IRS, S Corp and LLC, very different.
Got it.
So all of that is like the fundamental question that most solopreneurs face from day one. What is my business structure going to be? We find that for the vast majority of people, it's starting as LLC and then leaning their way and growing towards S-Corp while understanding their own personal tolerance around freedom loss, flexibility, gains, that sort of thing, is on there's two sides of the coin, right? If you're holding up your solopreneurial business as a coin, there's the delivery, sales, marketing, right? Actually doing whatever it is you do to get paid, closing clients, marketing your business. And then there's the back office, finance, and benefits, right? So everything Besolo does is on the back office side, right? Mm-hmm. We do give webinars and such around sales activities, but we're actively not touching that space right now. All the back office things are the things that the boxes you need to check just to even do business in a solopreneurial way at all, right? Everybody, if you start doing business as a business of one and you reach a very low revenue threshold, you have to do quarterly taxes. You have to estimate how much you're going to pay over that year and then pay the IRS 4 times a year. That's one of the big things that people get really freaked out about is like, oh man, how do I calculate this? And a lot of people end up working with a CPA who doesn't like you because you're a small business and you try to ask questions that they are not allowed to bill for. We're basically the least favorite clients in the eyes of most CPAs. With Besolo, like our accounting system will actually, because it's connected to your business bank account, all the inputs and outputs, it's seeing those and can actually do like a fuzzy estimation. We call it the quarterly tax speedometer. That's happening in real time as your business is growing. And then once the quarter rolls around, you have a much better idea of how big of a check you're going to write to the state and the Fed. So let's just go over. So like first big decision, right, is business structure, sole proprietor, LLC, S-Corp. The next big decision is business bank, right? If you're doing an LLC or an S-Corp, you should probably have a business bank. It's best practice to uphold the corporate veil, that liability protection that those structures give you, by having your business and personal finances separated. If you have a business bank and you are only running your business expenses, meaning you're buying stuff on debit card or credit card associated with that business, and you're receiving money from clients into that business bank account, it's actually really easy to do the business accounting now with a modern accounting system like Besolo. It just integrates with the business bank and helps you categorize all those things. And then by categorizing all those things will help you get much closer to being able to do those quarterly estimated taxes far easier. So business structure, business banking, accounting to drive quarterly estimated taxes and annual tax understanding, and also overall business like performance. How much am I making this year? And then kind of woven into that is compliance, right? There are dates that matter to businesses, all businesses. Businesses of one are no different. If you have an LLC or an S-Corp, there's a statement of information you have to file every once in a while. The quarterly estimated taxes come up every quarter, and then annual taxes every year. And there are, for S-Corps, there's even more dates associated with that matter. So being able to know, hey, it's time to do something is how Besolo, where we have a dynamic compliance calendar that's basically built off of the formation date of the business that says, hey, it's time to do this. Ask our team if you need help. And then the final piece is, beyond annual tax filing, which we do with USA-based dedicated CPAs for every member, is, okay, I've got all that stuff figured out. How do I recreate a benefits package that I had at my job? And that's a really nasty problem, right? A lot of people spend the first 0 to 24 months kind of wading through everything before the benefits access piece. And then they get their revenue dialed. They're like, oh, cool, I'm making 10 grand a month. I'm making 120. This is all right, cool. And I'm working half time. Okay, very cool. And then they get to, I'm making a lot of money. I should probably put some of that away. Like, what's my retirement structure? And most people full on choice paralysis once they get to benefits, can't figure out what to do. And so that's another thing that we've done is like turn those things into toggle switches. Like, here's a really great solo 401k. If you're truly a business of one, this is the best option. And it's included in the platform fee.
Does that help them decide? Because I know there's like a SEP IRA, there's 401k, solo and 4. There are options, right?
There are options.
Do you guys, is it a custom depending on their situation, or is it like most people are going to fit into this bucket?
If you are a true business of one, most people, the solo 401k is the best option, right? So, and then of course we have retirement advisors that folk can talk to make sure that they fit that box.
Yeah.
But, we screen and make sure that nobody who's going to who wants to hire employees, keep in mind, you can have as many contractors as you want. It's totally fine. And that happens all the time now. We call it a band of pirates, right? You can have a company that's got 6 contractors in it. It's you and 6 contractors, and it looks and feels and smells like a company, but it's actually all contract based. That is still technically a business of one, right? So in that scenario, solo 401k is still a really good option. And a lot of people get really fuzzy around SEP IRA, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, or solo 401k. At the end of the day, solo 401k, $69,000 contribution limit max, and you can do this really cool thing called a solo 401k loan, where you can actually take down some of the balance if you need it, up to 50% of the balance.
Wow.
So it's actually up to, it has a max cap of $50,000, but it's actually a really cool way to stack a rainy day fund in a tax advantageous way, right? Which is very unique. So that's why, and of course, if anybody has any questions about this, please reach out to us. Everybody's unique. We need to make sure you fit into that box. But for the people that solo 401k is really good for, it's, in our eyes, the best option, and is very flexible in this way.
Awesome. So I'm a solopreneur, and I'm, kind of been keeping my head above water with all these different things, trying not to get sued or, the nasty letter from the IRS. And I want simplicity, right?
Yeah.
When I come to Besolo, what do I get? What does it look like? How do I just make this simple? Because that's what I wanted when I was in this situation. It's just take this off my plate, make it simple, give me peace of mind. That's really what I wanted. I wanted peace of mind.
So, yeah, we like to say that the actual product of Besolo is playbooking this space, right? It's actually the tools that we have in the platform are a reflection of the playbooks that we find to be true across the vast majority of businesses of one. And I think the retirement plan scenario is a very clear example of this, where it's for the vast majority of folks who are true businesses of one, solo 401k is above and beyond versus the other options. So let's make that really easy and turn it into a toggle switch that they can turn on if and when they want to. So Besolo, right? It's the compliance, the formation, the tax, the accounting, invoicing, time tracking, all in one place. Human support around the tax cycles, the really scary tax cycles. And then if and when you need some benefits options, we've curated options to turn those into toggle switches. And all of that sits on a really strong foundation of playbooks for this space and expert support, meaning our team, that you can ask as many questions you want to, right? And we found that, and I found this for myself being in this space, and you probably did too, right? Choice paralysis is brutal. When you're trying to put together your operational stack, you're like, am I Harvest or am I Toggle? Am I QuickBooks? Am I Wave? Am I Zero? Am I, and which solo 401k plan is it? Where should I form my LLC? Do I need a registered agent? And we're just let's just check. Why don't you just make one decision? Let's check all those boxes in one decision, and then give you human beings you can talk to as things come up. And also you just know that we're approaching it as there's a playbook that is true for a business of one, and our tools reflect that.
Amazing. So if I'm listening to this, who is it for? How do I know if I'm a listener right now, I should come to Besolo and check it out, or maybe it's not for me?
Yeah. So we found typically the fit is really good for people who are in their first 3 years, and even more specifically, their first 12 to 18 months. That tends to be the time when folks are trying to put together this stack and struggling. Mm-hmm. We are openly saying today that, yes, it's more complex if you've already got all of these figured out. You got QuickBooks, you're using Gusto for payroll on the S-Corp piece, you got a great CPA that you love. Sometimes we'll hear, I've got a guy that does my S-Corp taxes and it's $500. I'm like, that's amazing. Do that. I can't compete with that at all.
Yeah.
But if you're completely overwhelmed, right? Or even moderately overwhelmed with stepping out of the walled city of W-2 work, where everything else was built for you and all you had to do was deliver, to, oh my God, I have to build the house that I'm living in, like while I'm trying to work and do this. We can just kind of help build that whole shell with one decision. And for, we have helped people who have been on QuickBooks and we can import that in, right? So it's not like a hard line that like, if you already made some of these choices, you can't still come into Besolo. But if the idea of making one decision to check, 10 or 15 boxes on this side of the coin sounds exciting and like a relief, right? I've had people thank me like, oh, thank you for making this. Like, I didn't want to think about this anymore. It's not, and it's truthful. It's not worth your time. And at the end of the day, having the human CPA is probably going to be comparably costed to what Besolo costs anyway. And we do it in a nice monthly service fee with no commitments.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So, and if people have questions or are looking for just a consult, do you guys do like a free consult or just a chat? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we'll get the links for all of that in the show notes so everyone can access it really easily. Is that the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah. We'll put together a landing page for the Mylance community, and you can book a demo there. But if you review everything in Besolo and you want to just get started as an LLC member, there's a link to that that's got a discount associated with it already. You get free LLC formation. You just got to cover the state filing fees. And then we also do a no risk free trial for the first month that nobody's backed out of yet, which is really exciting. So that's a good sign that we're onto something.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be scared. And if you do decide to back out, the LLC that we form for you is still yours. That's yours to keep.
Amazing. Cool. Any last words of wisdom or just something you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, if you feel like you stepped into this world and it's overwhelming, we found that a lot of people are just afraid to even ask questions, right? Because they don't want to seem like they don't know. It feels like everybody else has this figured out. They don't. Everybody, from my experience, 90 to 95% of people are living in some type of fear of a compliance, tax, or benefits issue. And that's where we're here to help. Whether that's with just, you can engage with our education, you can engage with, one of our team members just to get some clarity. At the end of the day, we're just trying to be the guides in this space to like get this done right and make it easy and sustainable. And however we can help, we're here to help.
Amazing. Well, I'll second the person that said thank you, because there's just a huge community of people that truly need this support. And I know firsthand it's not an easy business to build and navigate all the compliance stuff. So yeah, I know how challenging it is. So thank you on behalf of the community and the solopreneurs out there that really rely on you guys.
Once we saw that it was possible, like we couldn't unsee it. You know what I mean? We being in the shoes of solopreneurs for 10 plus years, I was like, and having my dad, have a business on my whole life and watching him complain around tax time, and complain is a very light version of what he was actually doing. It was like, all right, we got to make this work because it's no longer niche. There's around 3 million new full-time solos just in the United States alone. And like I said, the majority of them are doing exactly what everybody else is doing, which is walking around in a jungle at night with a flashlight, hoping they don't fall into a pit or get bit by a snake or something. And we're like, just going to give you the backpack, give you the trail map, give you the flashlight, make sure you got the right shoes on. And over time, we'll make it so that it's just very easy to get to a totally different paradigm.
Wow. Amazing. Well, Mark, thanks so much for being on the show and sharing all the insights and just everything that you're able to bring, your time, energy, all of it. So appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. No, this is the best part of the job. It's just getting to push this space in the right direction.